I know we probably have a few more people joining us, but we will start now. And I just want to say hi to everyone out there. My name's Danielle. I'm the Executive Director of Philipstown Behavioral Health Hub. I'm so glad that you can be with us this evening. And a little bit about the hub. The hub was started almost exactly a year ago. We opened our doors September 4th, 2019. And we're super excited to be here a year in with celebrating Recovery Month. September is Recovery Month, and we at the Hub, our mission is to create local access to addiction and mental health resources for our community. And we really believe in this local community-based way of connecting with each other and taking care of each other. And so that's what we've been trying to do this past year by fundraising and garnering community interest and really serving our community as they walk through our doors. We have our very own storefront at 5 Stone Street in Cold Spring, and we are open now from Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and we have a new care coordinator. Her name is Julianne, so please feel free to stop in and meet her. And we are also hosting an MSW intern right now from NYU who is going for her master's in social work, and her name is Amy. So we are a friendly bunch, and we really encourage you to stop in and say hi and bring your kids, bring your families, just so we can enjoy this beautiful space and you get to know where we are.
And bring your problems.
What would you say, David?
And bring your problems.
Yes, bring your problems, all your problems. We're ready. We're ready for you. And so September, like I said, is National Recovery Month. A lot of times we'll see things on social media and in the news about people's journeys through recovery. And it always feels a little distant to me when I know that there's people, our next door neighbors, people across the street, people living a couple of houses down, families that go to school with our kids that are experiencing their own recovery journey. And so at the Hub, we thought it would be a good idea to kind of look locally and look at people's stories and listen to people's stories who are willing to share locally about their journey. So I am so pleased to welcome David Pozis and Mandy Brindle, who are our panelists this evening. And hopefully one day we'll be able to do this all in person, which would be really fun too. But we are going to be cozy in our own homes, and Mandy is actually at the Hub right now, so you can get a little glimpse inside there, that beautiful space. But I just want to start a little bit by just kind of prefacing this by the courage that it takes Mandy and David to both be here. I get to experience firsthand every day when I hear when people walk through the door or call, and you know, the humility it takes to say, hey, I could use some support, I need some help, I'm struggling, or I want to share my story with someone else and help someone else who's struggling. And so I think just the fact that I'm so excited for the community to get to experience this as well tonight, because it's really a way to kind of look at the problems and look at the issues from a different lens. And we'll find a lot of similarities with Mandy and David's story, whereas before, I think if you don't really listen to people's stories, you feel like everyone's kind of different. And these problems of mental health and addiction are someone else's problems and we can't relate. So I'm excited for you guys to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
David, I wonder if you want to just start off a little bit. September is Recovery Month. Maybe if you could start off just talking a little bit about what the word recovery, what the idea of recovery means to you, and maybe share a little bit of kind of what got you here and talking about this.
Okay. Yeah, so I didn't realize that recovery didn't automatically start when you got sober until many efforts, many attempts at sobriety. And the process of healing for me has been looking at the reasons that I started using drugs in the first place that required the recovery. So, I mean, I guess it means a healing process, and it's never something that nobody ever says I'm a recovered addict, or at least I don't really hear people saying that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks, Stephen. Mandy, how about you? Do you want to share some of that?
Yeah, I think my recovery is not like, I guess before I experienced this, my recovery is from depression. So I wouldn't have thought like a mental illness could be in recovery. That wasn't an addiction. But I'm here to tell you otherwise. So to me, I think that recovery is switching like the process to being more active. So kind of as David was saying, like you don't realize that really what the source of the problem is when you're not yet in recovery. So being able to kind of activate that process of understanding kind of how you're going through an experience and being able to then start addressing and like making deep like internal changes to the mental pieces for me.
That's awesome. And I think I'm struck by both of you guys being on here together, and as the hub is focused around mental health and addiction, do you, when you were in your, in your own lives, do you feel like, maybe Mandy, you can speak to this a little bit, did you, before you were kind of in this process of recovery, did you feel a connection to those who were struggling with addiction issues, or did that feel somewhat like other to you?
No, it felt other. I actually remember my first time at the hub was David's talk, and it kind of lured me in because it was depression, it was student athlete, and we got there and we talked about drugs the whole time, and like I was not ready for that because I wouldn't have quite identified, I think. But after getting to know David and like just hearing more of the stories, there's I think so many commonalities that we've seen so far, at least.
Yeah, and David, would you agree? How about for you? I think you're coming from a lens of like, where did that discovery happen for you, that connection between mental health and addiction?
I mean, I think I knew it from the beginning because I never got into other stuff. Like I used heroin for a very specific purpose. I drank, once before and haven't since. I never liked the other stuff, so it was an analgesic for me, and the addiction was a symptom of a bigger problem. I think throughout the just the course of living, I mean, going to rehab 25 years ago, addiction was the problem, and so like my own view of my issues was kind of invalidated, and that made things very confusing for a while. But yeah, I mean, there was really never a doubt for me that they go hand in hand.
And so did you have the way to express that verbally to the people who were at the rehabs with you, or were you there, or were you kind of like feeling the connection but not able to verbalize that?
I mean, I tried. Like I had been. I was so ashamed of the depression that I couldn't ask for help, and so I just kind of hid it. And then I figured out that heroin was a painkiller, and I knew that I was hurting. So then I was ashamed of the heroin. And when my parents found out, I remember sitting there thinking, like, they're looking at me like this degenerate junkie, and I was so ashamed of that I couldn't tell them, this is why I'm doing this. So they sent me to rehab, and when I got there, there's this kind of intake evaluation thing, and I described my use as self-medicating, and I went through the whole thing and my history with other substances, which is very, very limited. And then the next day they said, okay, your diagnosis is cross-addicted. And they said, you might not like alcohol now, but you're liable to drink hand sanitizer, if you get desperate enough for a high. And I really fought with them. And I think at the time, I didn't realize that, it was, it's an AA-based rehab. their job is to treat addiction. My counselor didn't have any kind of medical training or anything. He was just a guy that, you know, they trained him, addicts lie, this is the behavior, you know, whatever. So he kept accusing me of, you know, addict behavior, and you're in denial, and kind of all these buzzwords. So when I said, you know, look, it stopped me from killing myself. Like, I think that's perfectly valid. And he said, depression's an excuse. Addiction is the problem. And when my mom came up for, you know, the like visiting thing, I tried to explain that to her as well. But, you know, who's she going to believe? Like, you got the counselor saying, look, your kid's going to die if you don't do this. He's a junkie and he's lying to you. And she knows that I've spent the past 3 years hiding my habits. So, I mean, I don't blame her for agreeing that that's what was going on.
Yeah, but it's just so I think it makes me think of people who, you know, individuals and families who come to see me, and it doesn't, like you said, it's kind of, it doesn't matter. The substance is kind of just the, you know, the substance isn't the main problem most of the times. It's like, and it's like, okay, over drinking may be your thing, pot may be your thing, heroin may be your thing, excessive exercise may be your thing, but it's all like kind of looking at, you know, it's all trying to treat or numb, you know, the feelings, that the uncomfortable feelings inside. And that's something I see again and again. And so I would say the same, I would say similarly from, you know, kind of working in the community in this area for a while, that's the causes, and the underlying causes are what have not been treated for a number of years.
Yeah, I mean, there's some very scary statistic that came out recently that, I mean, I think that's certainly true for everybody with any kind of compulsive behavior. It doesn't just happen. But with opioid addicts in particular, it's 95% of opioid addicts have some kind of mental health disorder. 97% in rehab are treated for addiction only. So, you know, I mean, that just completely invalidates, you know, why you're doing what you're doing.
Right. Absolutely. Mandy, can you, do you see like that connection, and like, like as David's speaking about kind of not treating the actual cause of his pain, does that resonate with you at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like before, a turning point for me in my recovery, it was just thinking that I could pacify, or like every birthday or New Year's, like would be like, it's all gonna go away, like just like that. And or if I wasn't feeling well, like if I was feeling particularly low, like, oh, I just need more caffeine, or I need sugar, or, you know, like those types of, which I mean, very easily could be replaced with heroin or any other, you know, illegal like substance, but it's the same like reach, right? Like you're trying to like change your mood, or just like your outlook. And so definitely, like, I think like now a big part in my recovery like toolkit is, if I feel a certain way, like it's important, like it's vital that I like identify where that's coming from, and really just kind of adjust from internally, rather than trying to like fix it or like put a band-aid on it, but to better like understand.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like, so what, can you kind of take us through that a little bit in terms of what that might look like?
Yeah, so I think for me, like I struggle with depression for ever since my teens. So it's been a long time. Just in the last couple of years, I feel like I've gained, like I would consider myself on the recovery track, and starting to learn how to manage that versus being managed by it. And so for me, like I still wake up having like feeling bad some days, or just like inexplicably low, but like things that I do now, and it took like specific tools for me to be able to like get above my thoughts to be able to do this, is to really just think like, where is this coming from? Like, has something happened recently? I also am a big fan of opposite action currently. So like identifying where something's happening, and then if all I want to do is kind of sit around, like I feel like mentally now I can kind of switch that and say like, no, like let's go outside, or like I kind of can know things that might help me a little bit more than
That's great.
Again, back to like the active piece, I feel like.
Yeah. I love that. Like just the, and you might feel like it's almost like making that decision ahead of time as a tool rather than, because a lot of times when we put that decision in our mind and like what to do in that moment, if we don't have kind of like a go-to, then it becomes very much, it's taxing to have to think about that and take yourself through that. Do I want to go outside? Do I want to step outside? Do I want to start moving around?
Yeah, and just like reminders of the strength that I've like the work I've put in, and like the strength that I have like through that now. Like sometimes I just have to remind myself with that by like putting on my like a hoodie that says good mood, or you know, like just like kind of like laughing at myself that like we can do this, like we got this, you know.
Yeah. And I feel like what a victory for you just being here tonight, sharing your story. How is this feeling for you? Like, does it feel scary? Does it feel like, gosh, I can't believe just a few years ago, I never would have thought I'd be doing this.
Yeah, I think it definitely doesn't feel like I should be screaming from the rooftops. Like it, you know, like I feel like when I was at my lowest lows, like I would literally Google like getting over depression, just looking for a voice of somebody saying like, you can live with it. Like you can like live and love and be happy. Like you can like have a fulfilling life with this. And like, I didn't see that voice anywhere that I looked. So like, I'm here tonight, like just to help start that. If somebody needs to hear that, like I would have never imagined at like my lowest lows that I would like be talking about it like from like the other side, you know,
Right.
like recovered, but like just from an active place of wanting to help myself.
Yeah, that's great. David, how about you? I know that you have a little bit more experience, you know, in terms of being very vocal about your experiences and your journey. How would you, long ago was it that you were like, I could never even imagine me doing that until now?
Yeah, I mean, I hid everything for a really long time. I mean, I told people that I had a problem with heroin when I was younger, but everybody in my life believed that I went to rehab at 19 and I never looked back until about 2 years ago. I'm 44, and my family, like my mom and my wife, I told like a little more than a year ago. So it's very new to me. And I think what I realized along the way was like, if I'm out there like advocating for to eliminate stigma, and you know, we should be as comfortable with our bad feelings as we are with you know, physical pain and all like that, then I'm working against my own objectives if I'm pretending that my bad feelings don't exist. And how can I tell my kids, you know, it's a sprained ankle is no different than, you know, being depressed if I'm pretending that, you know, if I'm suppressing my stuff. So I had to really force myself to get out there. And I mean, what I've definitely found is the more public I am about it, and like the more people I'm reaching, I've never felt more secure or less insecure with that's probably better with who I am, and kind of accepting of myself. Like I'm completely exposed at this point, and I don't have any shame about it. It doesn't change the fact that like I still wake up on many mornings and can't stand myself, but I'm happy to tell you that happens.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, which is amazing. And I actually was on the phone today. I shared with David that I was on the phone today with an amazing company based out in the West that does some amazing work around opioid use disorder, and David made that connection for me. So I think about, you know, David sharing his story, and the more that he's public about his experiences, the more he's bringing together these people who are actually, you know, kind of working to change the way that the system works. So I think it's a great example of how decreasing the stigma and shame and trying to, you know, get rid of this can only mean great things for communities and working around these problems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the stereotype is so pervasive, whether it's depression or addiction or anything. I mean, like Mandy, when you talk about, you know, being, I think it was like the homecoming queen or you know, the kind of, you know, your high school goings on or whatever. I mean, I was, you know, popular dude in high school, and I think that's the thing. It's like, it's very easy to look at whomever and say like, well, that, you know, that's not a junkie. That's not a sad person. You know, whatever it is. And it's just not true. We'd never be surprised to find out that anybody's struggling with depression or addiction or anything if it was so obvious, and yet we're stunned, you know, all the time. So, you know.
Absolutely.
That kind of ties in. It looks like we're getting some questions from viewers, which is awesome. Please send them in. But one of them is, how can societal stigma slow the recovery process? I think that kind of like ties into what we were talking about with like just even like I hate to complain, but like I have all of these things I should be grateful for and I should be happy. I don't want to complain, but like this isn't bothering me. Like just like the fact that we have to say we have to complain to share like how we're actually feeling is like a halt to the recovery process, I feel like. So
absolutely. And go ahead. Who's gonna, Mandy, did I cut you off? Sorry.
No, I was just seeing if you guys had thoughts on that, how societal stigma slows the recovery process.
I mean, for me, there's definitely an element of, I take buprenorphine to stay sober, and for a long time I was going to a drugstore very far away to have a stigma-free experience of filling my prescription. And like, it's very easy to, you know, stigma, like nobody really knows what that is, but I would go into the pharmacy, and I mean, I look a little scraggly now, but even in like, you know, clean shaven and a suit, and I would get a tough time. And there's so many times it was just like, you know what, I had no problem functioning on heroin. I'm spending more money on doctors and the buprenorphine. It would be cheaper and more convenient and less miserable to just go back to that. And with the fentanyl that's in our illicit supply right now, like that's death. And you get enough bad experiences like that, and it's very easy to make that jump. And I think another thing that contributes to the stigma, like there's, I mean, what you were saying, Mandy, about, you know, I can't complain, and like there's these things that are just kind of so ingrained in what we say and what we do. Like I had this conversation with my brother recently about AA. And I mean, I've never been a big fan, and I certainly don't mean to bash it. You know, if you like it, that's great. But the idea that, you know, they use the term disease in the 1930s to try to get rid of stigma, but the anonymity implies you ought to be ashamed. I mean, you know, if if there was nothing to be ashamed of, then you know, it wouldn't be anonymous. So there's so much that's just built into our system that we don't even think about, but does perpetuate the stigma. More people might be out there saying, yeah, I'm an alcoholic, you know, or whatever, if it wasn't anonymous. And there's so many people that are just like, I can't talk about it, it's anonymous, without even thinking about what that means. So.
And I think also just in terms of getting at the problems, like early intervention, you know, which means, you know, basically getting at the problems before they kind of explode to the level that they could get to. The stigma really slows that down, because instead of, you know, a 16-year-old in high school saying, you know what, I've been sad for a long time now, you know, I'm not feeling myself, but like, that's weird. Like, I don't want anyone to think I have something mentally wrong with me. You know, I think that this is just being a teenager, and I don't want to really share that. And I'll just joke about it with my friends. And so like, maybe then someone will pick up on something. And if they don't, then it's not really a problem. And I'm just kind of overreacting. And So I see a lot of that, like that, and parents too, having that, is something really wrong? It's so hard to tell the difference in a child and an adolescent between, typical adolescent behavior and then what's a red flag. And so I think the stigma sometimes, like we've talked about, if you had like a fever, or if you had something that was wrong with you and you would go to the doctor, right, you wouldn't wait for it to progress to be something really, really bad. And so I think that that's what happens a lot of times with the stigma. It slows the recovery process just because it's so long before someone's actually reaching out for help.
Yeah, and the feeling bad about it in the first place. I mean, my mom was unconditionally loving and great, but she would say to me all the time, you've got to decide to be happy. Why are you sad? And you hear that enough. I mean, by the time I was like 6 or 7 years old, it was like, shit, she's going to think there's something wrong with me if I'm not smiling. And I didn't want to disappoint her by saying, hey, I really just can't stand myself, and this is awful. And I think that's got to be the case, especially now with so many expectations on kids, with the getting into college and all the sports and all the activities and stuff. Like it's got to be so hard for a teenager today to say, I'm overwhelmed, I need help, whatever it is. And I wonder, like, if there's like so many times, I think for me, like I got sick with a bad enough cold that it was like incapacitating, and I wonder how much of that was like I needed something to kind of knock me out, so I could just shut down.
Yeah, I think with the slowing of the process, like Danielle, you're talking, until like it gets to a certain point, like definitely in my journey, like hearing like, oh, you just snap out of it, or just choose this or choose that, and like that's the root of depression, is that you literally can't, like you can't do that, and sort of then feel like worse. It's just like this bad staircase. So just like,
And the concern also is, I mean, at least it was for me, like when I finally started talking about it, and my mom would be like, I'm worried about you. It's like, oh my God, that's that's worse. I'd rather you not know, because then I feel like there's something terribly wrong with me.
And then that feels like a lot of pressure too, a lot of pressure on eyes on you that, like you don't want to displease your mom, and you don't want to make your mom sad, and you don't want to.
Or worried.
Right.
That's the shame, right? Like,
yeah, I'm worried about you. I don't want you to worry about me.
Right.
I'm cool.
So a question came in about how do I get a family member into the recovery process? So that's, I don't know if maybe one of you want to talk to that question a little bit and break it out a little bit. I don't know if you have any thoughts.
I do. Do you, Mandy?
Yeah, I have some, but you can start.
All right. I mean, first, you can't get anybody into anything until they're ready. So, the idea of like interventions that used to exist, that's all been scientifically disproven and debunked in recent years. I mean, I think with anything, it's like compassion is much better than like, you're an asshole and you're destroying our lives, and if you don't get help, we're gonna, these tough love ultimatums and stuff just don't work. If you kind of prop somebody up and say, hey, we love you and we want you to be happy, and we know that this, like, nobody wants to be suffering and miserable. It's that we can't get out of our own ways. So I think we kind of look at it through this like antiquated lens instead of just like very fundamental, what would I want somebody to do for me if I was in that spot? Like, would you want somebody going, you get into treatment or we're going to kill you? Like, no, you don't want that. So, I mean, for whoever's asking that question, I would say, put yourself in that person's shoes. How would you want to be treated? And then that's what you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think probably how you want to be treated and how you think you should be treated are different too. So like really like that compassion piece, and just like sitting in the struggle, like being open to like sitting beside that person, going through whatever they're going through, and not judging or correcting, right? You know what I mean? Like just being there with them and kind of like seeing how you can support them in different ways.
Yeah. And that's hard to do. I think it's hard. We're in such a society that wants the quick fix and we want the quick fix for ourselves, and we also want the quick fix the people we love, because we don't want to, we don't want them hurting. So it's, I think the families that I see, like the, you know, the spouses and the parents who are, I would say I do sometimes more work with them because they're so motivated to get their loved one into treatment, but their loved one's not there yet. And so how can a lot of the work I do is how can I support them in providing that safe space that is not, I think a lot of that, David, about with your mom, and like I see a lot of loved ones like that are so worried that that's all projecting onto the person struggling, and that makes it kind of even harder to be really honest. So that's, you see a lot of with families I've worked with, and the person who is struggling with the addiction or with the mental health challenge, that they start hiding things from their loved ones, even though they may have been honest with them from the beginning, but because they don't want to worry them, and they don't want to disappoint them. They don't want to share when there's been a relapse. That then it becomes harder. So a lot of the work I do with families is just trying to really keep them taking care of themselves, so that they are not they're not so overwrought with the problems of their loved one that they kind of start spinning into an unhelpful place. And so I think a lot of that, we talk about self-care and just taking care of themselves, and then educating and educating yourself. I can just keep going back to this question. I think until that family member is ready, there's so much that you can do to educate yourself on the scientific-based evidence out there around addiction and mental health, where when they are ready, you can just be kind of a really supportive source of information and education. And yes, I'm right beside you, and I don't understand everything you're going through. I can't totally get it, but I have really done a lot of work to try to get as much information as I can to try to help you.
Yeah, there's I just want to add that there's been a lot of studies out recently on forced abstinence, especially with regard to opioids, and abstinence when it's forced has a better chance of killing the person than saving their lives. So if the question is specific to opioid addiction, you know, Narcan, buprenorphine, methadone, those are much better options. Forced abstinence is the most lethal thing you could possibly do.
And David, maybe and we can talk about this in terms of addiction and mental health, but like the you know, the assistance of medication through this journey. Maybe you could talk a little bit more to that, and that I know a lot of times we talk about tools that can help us socially, emotionally, and physically in ways that may be self-motivated by ourselves, and we have the tools within us, and then we also need a lot of times assistance from medication and from other sources. So maybe you can each take a little bit of time to talk about that.
Sure. Who's first?
David, do you want to start, just because you were just talking about MAT,
Yeah.
medication assisted treatment?
Okay, sure. So, I mean, like the mechanics of a hit of opioids or any other kind of compulsive anything are you know, the same as far as like the flood of serotonin and dopamine. But for opioid addiction in particular, there's changes that take place in your brain at a cellular level that don't necessarily reverse when you stop using. So the idea that you know, sobriety gets easier with time is true when you quit drinking, smoking cigarettes, compulsive hoarding, whatever. But it's not the same with opioid addiction. And so the point of buprenorphine and methadone is that they bind to your opiate receptors like full opioid agonists, and it's really like a warm blanket over them. And so for me and for people, and it's not a question of like, you know, well, I was on it for a really long time, or I'm some hardcore junkie. It's just, this is what happens to everybody. With every dose, your opiate receptors multiply. And so it's like you've got this massive array of opiate receptors that need to be saturated with something. And it's like a drought. And in a drought, nothing can grow. And so the idea of, and I think this goes back to the first question of sobriety and recovery. Like I thought, all right, well, I stopped doing this stuff that everybody says is so bad for me. Why aren't I feeling better? But if you look at it from the flip side of if my leg got cut off and the doctor prescribed opioids and somebody said, you got to stop taking that stuff, you're a junkie, and I stopped, my leg wouldn't feel better. So it's the same thing. I was using them for depression. Everybody's using it for something. And so if you just abruptly stop without anything else, for some people it's okay. For most people, it's not, and you don't have to be on it forever. I mean, I have no intention of stopping, and I don't care if that bothers anybody. I know what I need, but
stopping using Suboxone.
Yeah. I mean, it's fine to look. It beats the alternative, and I know that for me, the idea of not having that saturation, I've experienced it. And, antidepressants didn't work for me. And antidepressants don't work for like 40% of people who use them. So, it's like I think we kind of have this idea of like, you got to stop and one more hit is going to kill you. And like this kind of very alarmist mentality that's very, very antiquated and has been since, been debunked. But if we look at it from science and evidence and compassion. I mean, like I have this conversation with my family not too long ago. You're going to take that crap forever? Yeah, I am. And is your objective for me to be not putting foreign substance in my body and jumping off a roof, or to feel like I'm a productive, happy person? Because if it's the former, then, I'll be dead, but I won't have drugs in my body. Like, what do you want?
And I think it really goes back to like, also how one size doesn't fit all, like that there's like, this is as individual as any other medical issue that you can have two different people going in with the same diagnosis, and they're coming out, and one treatment works really well for someone, another treatment doesn't. So I think it's so often, I think with addiction and mental health issues, they're kind of put in this basket of oh, okay, let's just deal with it. Like it doesn't have to be individualized, or it doesn't have to be, it's like the real thought process that goes into breaking down a medical issue, and kind of, okay, what's off here, and what can we tinker with here to kind of make this better for this individual. You don't see that happening as often in this world.
Yeah, you don't. I mean, I think it's really because, I mean, for the long, it was perceived as a moral failure for the longest time. And then you have the 12-step, program came along with the only path to remission is to put your life and will in God's hands. And, if you swap addiction for any medical condition, that whole idea, makes absolutely no sense. And yet, for whatever reason, we believe like, oh, of course, that's what you do. If you're an addict, you go to AA meetings and you stop drinking, you're fine.
Yeah, but I think you've made this point before too, is that even if like with support groups, if you're suffering with cancer, and you attend a support group for breast cancer survivors or breast cancer, that's amazing form of support and growth for you. And yet you're not going to stop seeing your medical doctor. You're not going to stop seeing your that piece doesn't just go away. So I think that's
part, I hope that didn't sound wrong.
No.
The support group part is great, and if AA works for you, like definitely do it. But if you're in there feeling like, oh my God, I should really be on something, be on it. Get the buprenorphine, get the antidepressants, whatever it is. Like as a support group with cancer, like nobody would, or it would be very unlikely to not have surgery and see a doctor and just go to the support group and think you're going to live.
Absolutely. And someone actually asked, how can someone learn about or access medically assisted treatment in our area? So that's, so you can definitely come to the hub, and we can try to help you through that process. It is a process, and we can help you through that, because it's definitely tough to navigate, and it's not as easy as just every doctor having access to that medically assisted treatment. But there's special doctors who have a special waiver that they're able to prescribe. And then there's also different clinics that also have doctors on staff and psychiatrists on staff who are able to prescribe. David, do you want to speak a little bit more to that at all?
About the doctors and clinics? And
about MAT, well, not too deep into there, but like just in terms of accessing MAT treatment, there's definitely challenges, and what the hub is here to really try to make that less challenging for people. So I don't know if you wanted to talk to that a little bit in terms of any other advice for someone trying to learn about accessing.
Yeah, I mean, it's gotten a lot easier since COVID. They eased the restrictions where telemedicine, it can be prescribed by telemedicine now, which is a huge change, but there's still a patient limit to how many patients each doctor can see. It's not like just calling your doctor and saying, I need this. I mean, it like 7% of physicians in the country have the special license to prescribe it, and we're trying to get legislation pushed through to change that, but it's not going to happen anytime soon. So it does require a lot of planning.
Yeah. And again, like you, and at 845-809-5050 is the hub's number, like that you can, and we're at philipstownhub.org. So if you need help walking through that, through that is a major part of why we're here. Mandy, did you want to talk a little bit towards, like, in terms of depression and your experience there?
Yeah. So just speaking on like the medicine side, I was in therapy for a very long time, just trying to like work my way through it, and had very little progress, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
It was just always like the same, and it just started like getting worse. And because to me, like, medicine had a stigma associated with it. Like I felt like I was like quitting, or like I wasn't strong enough to do it on my own, like those types of like perspectives on it. And finally, like I guess in due time, like when I was ready, I gave it a try. I was in counseling, as well as a meeting with a psychiatrist to work on like medicines and dosage, and that, I think like that combination was really important for me. But it was not until that point that I was able to get above my thoughts. Like I just couldn't, like David was talking about the physiology behind it a little bit, of the different receptors in your brain, and how my therapist described it as they're just bleeding. And
Mandy, I lost you for a second. I'm not sure if I couldn't hear you for a second. David, can you hear Mandy?
I couldn't hear Mandy.
No, we just lost you for a second, Mandy.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
You were saying about the the bleeding, and then your doctor talking to you about that.
Yeah, I guess I tried to do it without medicine for a very, very long time and wasn't successful. And when I say try to do it, I just try to like get above my thoughts and to help myself progress into a healthier direction. And once I started antidepressants, I remember coming home from work one day and I sat down and I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't think about myself like until 10 a.m. today. Like just like those small things that, like, looking back, like I remember like my first year of not being like totally like wrecked by this kind of underlying piece of me. It didn't have, like, I wasn't counting down the days. Like I was like, oh my gosh, look at that. Like it's been a year, and I wasn't on antidepressants that long. It was actually just a few months. But just that time allowed me to like get above these thoughts that were just like really tearing me down all the time.
Yeah.
To be able to work through, strategies on how to correct them.
Yeah, and I think that your story, I think, resonates would resonate with so many people who it's like they can't, like I remember when you first shared with me, and you spoke about like not even being able to, it was like you were just kind of seeing everything fuzzy, and like it was just kind of like pulling, you weren't even able to get to the spot where you could try these techniques to make your, to kind of like work on these issues because you couldn't even get there. You couldn't even get to that spot.
No, yeah, not at all. And even on antidepressants, it took a couple of weeks or a month, you know, to start to feel like, you know, to notice like those gains. But it was, I mean, for me personally, like that was life-changing.
Yeah.
And
I think it's important like that we hear these different things and the different tools that work as people are, you know, working through recovery, like, and maybe it's something that I think as people are struggling and they're in the midst of like their struggles and they haven't gotten to the point where they've been in treatment yet. I think about this question too. How do I get a family member into the recovery process? It's like, there's a lot that needs to happen even before that in terms of treatment, in terms of, you know, admitting there's a problem and talking about that, and then treatment, and then recovery is really kind of like, is a lifelong process. And so like David was saying, no one says, okay, I've recovered, I can kind of relax and, you know, take a break. It's in many ways, and you hear this term relapse is part of recovery, and it's kind of become, you know, something that's heard more and more, but that when it's really like, when you're really in it, and even for me on the other end of that, and just when people have to make, you know, pick up the phone or come in and say, I used, you know, this is like, and like the shame a lot of times that accompanies that, that's part of that stigma too. Like, it's not just about stigma about admitting you have a problem, but also about, you know, when you've been in recovery and then you have to say, you know what, like I'm struggling again. And what does that look like? You know, how can we as a community support the recovery process of those around us, in a way that's not like, oh my God, like what happened? Like, this is the end, you know, that's it. You messed up, you're done, you failed. And so, and also it kind of reminds me again of, you know, loved ones and how our approach can be, they're so upset, like, no, I thought this was it. This was the time. And this was, you know, this was we thought this was the quick, you know, we thought this was the fix, even if it's been a while, can feel extra hard for the people who are struggling in the midst of that. So like this idea of relapse, both in mental health and an addiction, is very real.
And that first step also, I mean, like I was thinking, as Mandy was talking, that like the idea of getting somebody into treatment, like it's so maddening for the family and the friends, whether it's addiction or depression or whatever it is. I think addiction is so much harder for families if there's like, you know, stealing or you know, whatever is sometimes associated with it. But I'm sure that it was hard for Mandy's family to see, you know, well, she's really down. She's got so much going for her. You know, what's going on here? And if somebody were to have said, you know, hey, you got to get your shit together. This is no way to live. If it were me, I would have felt so much worse. I would have felt like even more of a failure than I already felt like. Yeah. And so I think it's really just a question of having compassion. And as you were saying, Danielle, with the relapse happens, it's like, you know, if somebody has cancer and the cancer comes back, you don't say like, well, you fucked this whole thing up because you got the cancer again. You know, so just having that compassion, you know.
That's so true. Mandy, did you want to speak to that a little bit? Like, I think just in your journey, and like, I feel like that's something that's not as talked about sometimes when people have struggled with a mental health issue. I think it's a tagline almost like, and that's why we're very purposeful in talking about Recovery Month from these different lenses. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think just like being able to think again, like what, I just think the perspective is hard. Like, I think sometimes like if you're not the one going through it, like even those closest to me who have been through all of my journey with me still would say something like, you know, we can still just like kind of decide to do this or decide to do that. Like, I think that it's still just a little tough, you know, to really wrap your mind around not being able to choose certain things. And so I think like having that compassion and kind of like taking a step behind that person going through whatever they're going through to like, you know, just kind of learn from too, like what that perspective is and what they're struggling with, I think.
Yeah.
That's really the key also, because everybody, I mean, you only have your own perspective. And so many times, like, you know, when my mom would say to me, you know, you have to decide to be happy and stuff like that, like I didn't have the wherewithal to say, like, that's how you think and you can decide to be happy and that's great. I don't have a choice about it. And like, that sounds crazy to somebody who's able to go, you know what, I'm just going to be happy today.
Yeah.
But
You know, alternatively, like people, like I think about a few people that have like been through it all, and like to hear their perspective change over time is like, it's like the best form of love, right? Like when like you can tell like they really get it, and like they're here for me, and they'll take an extra 10 minutes or 15 to help me kind of talk through this feeling I'm having and help me identify where it's coming from. Or if I'm having a bad day, like they'll follow up with me, or, you know, like just to know that like army, like that community around me is in tune, like with my recovery process.
do you feel like you have that?
I do.
You do.
I do. I feel like my family, my spouse, like because it's, I mean, I think, you know, I've had this, I've had it for like half of my life. So there's been different phases of my life that different people have shared. I would say like the crux of it happened in my 20s, and my spouse was like my like witness to it all. And I think that like learning through it together with somebody that was patient and like supporting in that way, like helped me tremendously, just to know that like there's no judgment here, you know, like we can talk, I can say that I hate myself over and over and just want to like escape a situation, but like I know that I can say that and be like embraced at the end of the day, you know.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. And how do you think that, like, how do you think that we can create that kind of, you know, like how do you think the best way to create those supports for people who may feel like they don't have that, like they don't have that naturally within their family structure, within their peer structure, like within a community or within, you know, like a smaller setting? Like, what do you think? Do either of you have ideas about that?
I feel like the more that you talk about it, like you'll find your tribe. Like if you, like just me like saying on Facebook, like, oh, I'm looking forward to talking about this tonight. I've had people say, hey, like had no idea that this was your experience. I'm also going through this and I don't know who I can talk to. Like, can we just chat? You know, like I think just I think learning how to kind of share and identify people who might be like unconventional in the sense that that's something that you can build if you don't have it.
Yeah, absolutely. David, how about you? Any ideas?
I mean, I haven't really felt like I've been able to connect in that way with a lot of people, and I think the heroin makes it hard. I mean, like any conversation that I've had with my family about it, I mean, I was very lucky in the sense that it never caused, like I didn't, you know, I never got arrested. I didn't steal, like you know, there was no, you know, negative consequences or whatever. It just made me feel not depressed. And I would say that's my mother and my brother, and they're like, do you realize how crazy that sounds? You know, and I would say to them, like, you're looking at it from the, like, you know, it's this illegal thing and it's terrible and whatever. Like, I'm just talking about what it did for me. And I think we have this idea that, like, well, that's enabling and it's rationalizing and all of these kind of buzzwords that come with the territory. And it's very hard to break through that. And like the last conversation I had with my family about it, it was like, you know, you guys are totally okay with everything. And the minute heroin comes up, it's like, you just kind of lose your minds. And I understand, but their reaction doesn't reflect reality. You know, I mean, I get that it's dangerous. Like I'm not endorsing it in any way, but the you know, it's like you have to kind of react to like what's actually going on here. not the kind of stereotype of what we're supposed to believe, and blah, blah, blah. Because in a lot of cases, somebody's experience, whether it's with drugs or depression or whatever, like doesn't fit what you think it is. And people come in with these preconceived notions, and then it's like you've got to not only explain your situation, which is going to be different than the stereotype, but then they've got to wrap their mind around, well, this isn't what I thought depression was. It wasn't what I thought, whatever it is.
Yeah, and a lot, it's like ends up being a lot of education on your part, like a lot of work doing that education for your support system. Yeah.
And that, I mean, for me, like there were so many times where it was just like, you know what, I'm so overwhelmed and in such a bad place right now that if I have to turn this into like a class on how to deal with this, like if I had to teach you how to support me, like I need help,
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be, an asshole about it, but like if this is going to involve me having to do more, like I can't do it right now. So I think I just kind of gave up after a while. But
I would think that like you find a lot of that like support through your public life, that you find, like I feel like people reach out to you, and like do you feel like do you feel like it's reciprocal in that way? Because I feel like a lot of people reach out to you with their experiences, and do you feel like that you hesitate from doing the same, like you don't feel that the other way around?
I mean, it's funny, like I've built some really amazing relationships since I started getting out there with my stuff, and the people that I'm closest with right now are have experienced what I've experienced, and I think that's really helpful. But also, like talking to, I mean, I hear from so many parents who lost a kid to overdose, and being able to kind of like walk them through what it really is, as opposed to this idea of what we're supposed to think it is. Like that's been really helpful for me, like to feel accepted by by all of those people. And then I think about that and I'm just like, what, it shouldn't even be that like I'm grateful to be accepted as like a fucking person. I mean, I don't know, like that just seems kind of crazy sometimes. So
it just shows how much more work there is to be done around the stigma and shame, because I think so many times when people are in like this realm and talking this talk for a long time, you're like, oh, you could think we've done so much to take care of the stigma and shame, until you're really like, well, really, like I say to my own friends, so if your child was having an issue, with substance use, like you would come to me because like, I'm the, director right down the road, like this organization's right here. So you would not hesitate at all to pick up the phone and call me. And like, it's so interesting to me. I'm like, gosh, even this, you don't know what, there's still so much work to be done. So we do have to wrap up. I'm so grateful to both of you for your bravery and for sharing. And I agree that sharing these stories is exactly what needs to happen in order to, make this reality of like really building a community of resilience and a community of recovery. And what does that mean? Like, what does that look like? What does that mean? And I do think it starts with exactly this, sharing our truth and sharing these stories. So I'm so grateful. I just maybe just in closing, I did have like one last question, that what do you wish you knew 10 years ago that you know now and that you wish you had known then? Maybe we could just end with that. And just, it's interesting to me because it may save some people a lot of time in their own journeys. David.
I wish I had known that that I could take a chance on myself or believe in myself, and that it would work out. I think I was so afraid and so insecure and so just thinking I'm not worth it and nothing's nothing's ever going to work out, that I never really pursued anything other than what I thought everybody else wanted or whatever.
That's great. Thank you. How about you, Mandy?
Mine's really similar. I think it's, I wish I would have known that like you can manage depression with the right tools and with the right support system. At least I could in my experience. In that like 10 years ago, I would have never thought that I could like forecast or see myself that in a life that wasn't so heavy, like, you know, like so heavy with it every single day, every single moment, every single thought. Like, I never really anticipated that like freedom. And so I think, like what Dave was saying, like you're capable of taking a chance on yourself and like it'll work, you know, like you can do it. Even if it's the last thing that you want to do or think that you know, are worthy of doing. I think that is like the biggest thing for me.
I love that. Thank you both. And I think like both of you, you know, exemplify exactly what Recovery Month is all about, that hope, and hope is possible, like a life filled with hope. And that doesn't mean like a perfect life that there's no problems every day, you're not still encountering, you know, it seems, you know, a lot of the same stuff that everyone else is going through, but that you are, you know, it's a life filled with the idea that each day holds its own possibility. And I love what you said about taking a chance on yourself, like that everyone, you know, hopefully gives themselves that chance to really focus on themselves and like try to really ask what's best for me? How can I best support myself? So thank you everyone for joining us. Again, if you want to continue the conversation, please feel free to go to philipstownhub.org. We have a page on there that you can share your own recovery story anonymously. And then you can always email or call us at the hub as well. So thank you again, Mandy and David, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Have a good night, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.